Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here, and today I am continuing my Resident Evil month of discussions with what we want to see in Resident Evil 9. So there's a million things that we want to see, things we want to see, people we want to see, conversations we might want to hear. So this is all of that. So that's the discussion for today. What do you want to see / hear, or just experience as a whole, if you will, in Resident Evil 9? Because there's a lot. I shouldn't say there's a lot riding on it, because I don't, it's not like this is a live or die for the franchise. Even if they do exactly what every Resident Evil game has done, which is have one singular story that connects to basically nothing else, I'm sure it'll still be an amazing game. However, the last two mainline games have been just dropping random stuff, mostly because of Chris, where it's like, he pops up, boom, blue umbrella. Okay, I'd like more information on this. 8 comes out, boom, BSAA is the bad guys now because they're using BOWs, and Chris didn't know about that. I'd love to know more. 30th anniversary, still a little odd that they didn't consider that to be important enough to be like, hey, literally perfect excuse to have Jill and Chris come back as the main characters of a game, with them going against the company they literally helped fund, or found, I should say, with the BSAA. So I hope we get at least references. I don't think it's suddenly going to be like, boom, the BSAA shows up and then Chris shows up and Jill shows up. I would love all of that. What I want to see is everybody. I've mentioned this before. I want to see everyone just randomly show up. But realistically speaking, I at least want some references. I want references to conversations. I want references to moments throughout the franchise, including the CG films. I think that would be really important to do, especially because one of the alternate Leon costumes is his suit from, I think it's from the TV show that, it was obviously a movie, but they just split it up on Netflix. I think it's from that one, because that's the one where he and Claire had like a little bit of a falling out, but they haven't really talked about that. And they were both in Death Island, unless I'm mistaken, but I'm pretty sure that was the one where it was like everybody showed up, because that was the first time we ever saw Jill and Claire interact. So everybody was there, but they were also dealing with something else, so they didn't reference any of the other movies. But that was like a big deal. And even though that CG movie, I think, technically takes place before 6, if I'm not mistaken, it hasn't really come up. Like, I'm sure they probably solved all that since then, but I'd love to get some references to that. Like, hey, what did happen? Like, what did bring them back together after that moment where he was like, I can't really give you this info, so you can just spread it everywhere. And it was like, I think everybody was kind of like, oh, that's not the coolest move on earth, Leon. I think everybody felt that way when that one happened. So I'd love to hear some references to that. Like, I mean, we're going back to Raccoon City. We have to have something, right? Like, we have to have something where they say, hey, I remember when this happened. I don't think we'll get like, anime style flashbacks where it's just like, and then you see Resident Evil 2 Remake or anything. But they gotta have references to it. They have to have something where even if Leon wasn't involved, you have other characters reference like, oh, this thing happened, or I remember hearing about this crazy thing from Jill or Chris or something like that. So I'm hoping we at least get some references of other characters and things. Like I said, the dream would be that they just show up in the game. But of course, as much as I would love to think that Capcom was like, it's gonna be the 30th anniversary game, let's do this, this, and this, I don't think it really matters that much for them. I really don't. Like, technically, I realized this because I did a video and I forgot. There was a game that released on the 25th anniversary. It was RE8, and Chris was in there, but it wasn't like they did anything insane where it was like, holy crap, here's all these characters. Like, no, it was still the Ethan story. And then at the end of that, we got the BSAA thing, which, who knows? We may or may not hear those letters put together, but probably not, because they love to just do singular things. Like, the only thing that really leads into the next thing has honestly been like the RE4 remake, and that's because they threw up literal images from Resident Evil 5, just to be like, yep, we're still doing that, we're still gonna keep on keeping on. That's about it. Most Resident Evil games are very singular, where it's like, you do this thing, and then you're done. RE0 also would be the only other one, because they saw the Spencer Mansion at the end of the game. That's about it though. Every other Resident Evil is just like, all right, we're done. And that's really it. It doesn't really lead into like the next big thing. You could also count Outbreak if you want to, because the characters are just kind of together for the whole time. But I wouldn't count that as like the same thing as just like, a mainline game leading into the story, or at least hinting at the story of the next game. So I feel like that's a different experience, but they always keep them separated, but they also drop the craziest stuff. Like 7 and 8, we're dropping just like the wildest things at the very end of the game, where I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm familiar with my favorite franchise, and this feels new to me. And then it's just like, yep, it's new. And then that's it. It's kind of just like behind the scenes stuff where we have any of the information about what's going on, but we don't get to see the characters deal with it. We kind of hear about it, or developers, directors, all this stuff, they'll mention stuff like, yeah, this is kind of what we're thinking, or this is what's happening. But it's also like, well, I want to know what's happening from a video game. 30th anniversary game could have easily been Jill and Chris fighting the BSAA. I'm fine that it's not, but at the same time, how much longer are we gonna wait? We're probably getting whatever the next remake is gonna be, then we're gonna get the next mainline game. Is that gonna be the BSAA? Are they gonna talk about stuff? Like, what is going to happen? So there are a million things that I want to see pop up, but I'm also trying to be realistic, because as hype as it could be, and admittedly I think should be for the anniversary, they kind of do the most minimal stuff in general when it comes to anniversaries, whether it's games or just merch, where it's like, here's a t-shirt and that's about it. So I would love to see a million different things, but if I'm keeping it realistic and just slightly hopeful, I want to at least get references. If we're going back to Raccoon City, we have to get references to characters where it's like, hey, this thing happened. You know, they might even reference Marvin if we actually do go back to the RPD. Like, I know they showed a lot of stuff. I'm curious how much of that we're actually going to walk around though, because is it going to end up being, you know, all cutscene based? Or like, is there a reason to really walk around the RPD again? Is there a reason to really walk around a destroyed Raccoon City? Maybe. We just have to wait and see. But that does lead to something else that I would love to see. Another thing that I don't think will happen, but they should do it, and we deserve it. They should make one of the facilities from the RE2 remake or RE3 remake the dead factory from the original RE3. Since we didn't get that in the 3 remake, that's what we should have. They should literally just be like, all right, we kind of effed up, because they did. They know they did, especially if you're going with the RE3 remake, because technically that's where it was supposed to be. RE2 was like, okay, you changed it up and made it like very pristine. I don't hate that. I don't mind it. I didn't like it as much when they did it twice. And then in the remake 3, it was like the same thing. Obviously different design, you know, layout and stuff. But I'm like, you know, like the Dead Factory was way cooler because it was like an old abandoned facility that used to be a thing, and it was kind of gross and stuff. That was way cooler. So to have kind of the pristine facility pop up 2 separate times was kind of like, I don't, you know, it was like another reason to not really like the RE3 remake, because it was like, oh, you didn't even do like the Dead Factory, like what the F? So, once again, hopeful, dream amongst dreams, or it's just random stuff that should be done. Since we didn't get it, we should get, and honestly, I would love to see all the things that we didn't get in the RE3 remake put into this game as like a pseudo apology, like, yeah, we should have put those in the remake, but here you go. You know, we got them in 9. And at the very least, that would be super cool. But I think the having the Dead Factory would be like the #1 thing. Like, I wouldn't expect them to just be like, boom, here you go, Gravedigger, and you know, here's the park and all that stuff. Like, I would love to see it. I'd love to see the clock tower, even if it's destroyed, all that good stuff. It would be cool to have those references, which they should still do, just as references at the very least. If we don't travel there, it's like, oh man, the old clock. Just have Leon say something dumb like, oh man, clock tower. Like, I don't know, just reference it at least. But as an actual location, they should 100% make one of the facilities the Dead Factory. And it would be really cool if they actually did the one that was in RE3 remake, and then they made that the Dead Factory, because it's just more appropriate. Like, if they did it for the second, you know, the RE2 remake factory, it would be like, okay, it's still the Dead Factory, but it's also a little weird to do it that one when you could have just done RE3. But we'll see. We'll see what happens, because obviously the RPD wasn't 100% destroyed, so they could still easily be like, yeah, you go underground and then boom, that counts as the Dead Factory, which admittedly, it was larger than the one in the RE3 remake, so maybe that would be better, and they would just make it, you know, like, it would be the RE2 one, but just like absolutely destroyed and demolished. It would be cool. So either way, if they make a Dead Factory, that would be amazing. That's something I would love to see, just as like, here you go. We kind of effed up a little bit, you know, like, I'm still a little salty about it, but it's like, hey, we have the opportunity to do it, and it would be a great way to do it, and it would fit thematically. I mean, honestly, we got to go somewhere. We have to go somewhere that we've been, and it just makes sense to use one of the factories and be like, well, if the RPD wasn't fully destroyed, then the underground definitely was not fully destroyed. They went in there at some point after the bomb drop, and they're like, all right, let's do this, this, and this. All right, let's abandon this place. And then, you know, things grow and survive, and some virus does this or that, and then boom, you got some new monsters in there. So it just makes sense to do it that way, and that's definitely something I would love to see. Once again, that's probably being way too hopeful, same as hoping that a bunch of characters show up, but I would love to see it. We should at least be getting references. If we're going back to Raccoon City, you have to name drop other characters. And if Sherry is the character that was talking to Leon in that trailer, Claire needs to be in this game. You can't have 2 games with Sherry as an adult and we don't see her interact with Claire. Like, they got away with it in 6 because it was like, okay, that's the first time she's shown up, and her thing was mostly focusing on Jake, and she has, like, she crosses paths with Leon, of course. But if you're gonna do it twice, and she shows up again as an adult, and we still don't get Claire interacting with Sherry as an adult, I'm gonna be pissed. Like, it's gonna annoy me. It's not like it's gonna make me hate the game. It doesn't live or die on a Claire-Sherry interaction. But it's just one of those things. Once again, kind of like the BSAA stuff, who knows how long we're gonna wait for that. If Claire does not show up in this game and that does end up being Sherry that was talking to Leon, that's gonna suck, because it's like, wow, she's shown up twice and they put her with Leon. I understand they were all in Resident Evil 2, but clearly, if Leon shows up and that's the only time we see Ada, then you gotta stop playing around with Claire. Like, especially as somebody who's like, I'm a big Claire person, like, y'all, they kind of effing with me right now, because I'm like, that better not be Sherry, and if it is Sherry, I better see Claire show up. I better see Claire. So if it does end up not being Sherry and it's just maybe we got a different voice actor for Hunnigan or something, it's like, okay, that's cool. You don't have Sherry twice and Claire 0 times. I can live with that. But if that ends up being Sherry, I better see Claire Redfield pop up in the 7th game, or I'm going to be so annoyed. Like, you're going to give me Sherry twice as an adult, and neither time she gets to interact with Claire. That's crazy to me. So hopefully, if it's Sherry, we get to see Claire. In general, I want to see Claire. Obviously, I would like to see Jill more as a character, but this is mostly tying it into the whole Sherry element of the conversation. But I would love to see all of that. I would love to see, of course, a million other characters. I would love to see them reference some of the story elements, like the BSAA stuff. They're definitely not going to reference Natalia from Revelations 2, but man, oh man, they really need to get on that, because I'm like, come on, guys. They're doing something. Alex was in the RE3 remake as a mastermind. They had Maggie Robertson dressing up, and she looked just like her. It was super weird. Like, people mentioned it, and I was like, it is almost uncanny. Like, they could have put her in any color suit, and they specifically chose a white suit. That seemed like it was on purpose. It seemed like it was on purpose. Could be wrong, could be nothing. But boy, oh boy, was that a heck of an uncanny resemblance. So, I don't know. Maybe something's happening there, maybe not. But they really need to get on that, because that's been driving me nuts. Like, I mean, honestly, I think it's been a decade since that game came out. Revelations 2, I think it's been like a decade, if not more. Actually, I think it's been over a decade since that game came out. And it's like, hey, when are we gonna touch on this? At this point, it's been, the games are in real time. At this point, she's a teenager. She'd be in her 20s, because I think she was already like 9 or 10. So she'd already be like in her early 20s. It's like, hey, we have a character that could be a villain. Bring back the Wesker stuff. You could bring back Jake. I'm just saying, there are a lot of ways that there are storylines that could coalesce, and characters that haven't shown up in a long time could easily come back. Once again, I don't think that's going to end up all happening in Resident Evil 9, but it would be kind of cool. But the other thing that I would like to see is that Alyssa is alive. I want them to pull a RE5. I don't care if most people aren't familiar with Outbreak. I've only played it once in my life. It does not matter. I want Alyssa to be alive. So I hope they pull an RE5 and it's like, surprise, she was just like arrested, or like, not arrested, but just held prisoner for like 8 years and stuff. Rough, and that really sucks. It's really tragic. But if she's alive, that would be pretty neat. I would greatly appreciate that. And the second thing, of course, would be, I want Leon to live. I might be tired of him as the poster boy, because everybody's like, Leon's the best thing, since sliced bread. But still, I don't want him to die. I might want to see other characters way more than I want to see Leon. But that does not mean I want him dead, just so other characters can pop up. So I hope he lives, and I hope Alyssa's actually alive. I have no concern that Grace is gonna die, but that would be absolutely insane if they got us attached to a brand new character, especially as the daughter of an older character, and then they killed her. That would be nuts. They won't do that, and here's the thing. They won't do that because I think we're getting, honestly, we've been there, but we're getting to the point that it's kind of a Street Fighter situation. Like, okay, you can't keep them young forever, so you're gonna have to start this next generation officially. And Grace is a little too young, so if we're going, if we're keeping it year by year, you got to do a pretty decent time skip of like 20-something years to get back to Rose. So she's off in the future, so we're not gonna be dealing with her anymore, probably ever again. They might go back to it depending on how the franchise goes, but we're not gonna be seeing her for a long time, if at all. So you only got like a couple characters. You got Sherry, you got Jake, you got Natalia. If they wanted to do Moira, they could bring her back as well. I don't think she'd be all gung-ho about it just because of one of the endings of Revelations 2. So you got like 4 characters. And then, you know, Eternal Jill, I guess, because of how they're doing that with her being infected a bunch. And how they're just throwing that out for everybody now. Like, well, they're kind of infected, so now they just slow down aging and stuff. It's like, you just want to use the same character model. It's okay. It's okay. You want to save money, it's fine. But we got some characters. We only got like a little slice of characters that can really start going out there in the world. And then everyone else is getting older. And it's like, okay, you know, Leon's obviously older. Claire would be the same age. Rebecca would be the youngest of the original cast. And I think she's 30. If I'm not mistaken, it's slightly in the future. So I think she'd be like 35 or 36 in this game. So it's like, okay, you know, we're at that point where they're going to end the effing games, which they won't, 30 years and still making money. So either they're going to end them, they're going to restart the whole effing franchise, which they've already sort of done because we've gotten the reboots with the new timeline, but they're still going forward anyway. So they can't really just restart the whole thing because they've already redone the games, unless they actually do a full-on reboot, which would be insane. Or we're moving to the actual next generation. So I don't think Grace is gone because she's definitely going to be a part of that next generation of characters as they continue the franchise forward. So I don't think we have any concern about her dying. I'm hoping Leon will be fine because there's no reason to kill him off. Just let characters retire. Like, this is the type of franchise where I'm like, just let everybody survive and then they just get old and retire. Like, Barry's out. Like, if Barry ever showed up again, I'd be amazed. He was already old enough. Actually, how old was Barry? Like, you guys will have to look this up. I'm driving. But look at how old Barry was in Revelations 2, because he was in his 50s in that. And I think he was like, I want to say he was like 53 or something when that came out. Like, he's in his 60s now, so he's definitely not, you know, running and gunning or anything like that. And he was always, you know, kind of the slow powerhouse anyway. So I don't think he's going to be out and about, you know, shooting. If he shot his Magnum at this point, it would probably snap his wrists off. So I think Barry's out. Probably get some references, but like I said, you could bring Moira in if she feels cool with guns now. You know, Claire and Leon can still be out there doing their thing. Obviously, Claire's more on the investigative journalism side. Rebecca's a scientist at this point, so she's not even in the field really, unless they just want to bring her out, you know, like they pulled with Death Island. But for the most part, you know, she's behind the scenes. Everybody, you know, we got our couple characters that they just don't ever want to give us. So Chris is obviously out there. I'm sure Jill's doing something. It would be nice to know anything. We'll just have to wait and see. That'd be crazy. If Jill actually showed up, that'd be the greatest twist of all time. If they hit that entirely, that would be one of the greatest moments of my life. That Jill Valentine just showed up in Resident Evil 9. It would be instantaneously 10 out of 10. Like, I wouldn't care what else happened. If Jill shows up in this game, it will be a 10 out of 10. But we'll see about that. But other than those things, something I want is just unlockables. I did a whole episode on that. If you guys want to look into that one, just what I hope we get for unlockables. So definitely check that out. So that's a part of all the stuff I want to see is like, I just want to see some great unlockables. I want to see some great extra modes. I imagine we're probably going to get DLC. I'm curious how that's going to play out. Obviously, we'll have to beat the story to see, like, is it going to be a continuation of something after the story? Are we going to have like little side stories and stuff like that? That would be really cool if they ended up doing that, if characters did make cameos and then they made DLC for the characters that cameo in the game, because they're like, hey, I'm gonna go off and do this thing, and then we get like a little, you know, a quick like 2 to 3 hour DLC with another main character. That would be cool. That would be a nice way to do it if they didn't want to be like, hey, we're just gonna throw them into the game. If they have a little cameo and then they do something that helps, they could actually make something of that. Especially if they say like, hey, the characters are in Raccoon City. There's a lot of potential if characters make cameos that they can make a lot of DLC off of that and be like, hey, here's this little side story, and it'll be like, you know, like I said, like 2 hours or something like that. I wouldn't hate it. I think that'll be fantastic if they did that. But I want to see some characters show up. I know they won't reference the games because they're all very singular, but I would love to see them just reference something with the Blue Umbrella / BSAA stuff. That's like the biggest thing that's just up in the air. That, and of course the Natalia stuff from Revelations. Those are the 3 plot lines where I'm just like, please give us something. You can't just keep dropping hints at the end of one game and then be like, all right, we'll see you guys at some point. It's like, they have to stop doing that and actually do that story eventually. So I hope at this point, with it being back in Raccoon City, they reference the characters like, yeah, you know, this happened with Chris and Jill and Claire. Like, they just reference something about them, and then they say like, well, this is what they're somewhat up to now. Like, at the very least, to give us a hint that they're still thinking like, yes, we are gonna move forward. We're gonna figure something out with the Jill, Chris, BSAA storyline. Like, I just want at least some hints towards that. Something, please. Because it's been 10 years since Natalia. And if we're going with the Blue Umbrella stuff, that was, actually, I think that was like 10 years ago. I think that was 10 years ago, and then the Natalia stuff was more than 10 years ago. So it's been a decade. And then, less than that, of course, with the BSAAUs and BOWs. But I'm tired of like just little hints. That kind of should have been the main game at this point, especially if we're going back to Raccoon City. But we'll see how everything plays out. I'm sure I'll love the game, and then I'll still just be like, can we get some answers to that stuff though? So I hope we get some hints at the very least, just like slight hints, something. And maybe they'll wait until after they do the remake of 5 to do it. I'm not really sure, because it'll be like, hey, the BSA and all that, and then you jump to, at that point, I guess it would have to be 11, because if we're getting a remake and then the next one, and then it'll have to be the remake of 5 after that, and then the next timeline game, or current timeline. So maybe not until 11 they'll actually do that. Who the F knows? But at this point, there's a lot to want. There's a lot of things to hope gets referenced, and hope we just see in general as far as characters are concerned. But I would love to know what you guys want to see in Resident Evil 9. I know this is definitely one of those ones where it's just all over the place. Like, we want this, we want that. Like I said, Unlockables has its own episode, so definitely check that out as far as like all the Unlockables I hope we get. I definitely shout out the PRL 412 laser cannon, because they took it from us in the RE4 remake. We need that back. That better come back. It won't, but it should. It definitely should. But anyway, I want to know what you guys want to see from Resident Evil 9, so please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.